3rd. Hello, mean girlies.
Hello. We both wore on pink today, too.
Oh my gosh, we did. Even though it's like 65 degrees outside and
I love it.
We're both wearing open toes.
Well, yeah, because then it gets up to like 80 something.
I know. Then you start sweating.
Yes.
Even if you put a sweater on and you take it off. The classic counselor cardigan.
Well, I don't know about you, but to get ready for this podcast today, I was like, I need something that I can like comfortably sweat in.
Oh, I 100% put these pants on.
It's your body language.
Well, and the fact that like before this, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel the gurgs in my chest. But yeah, I picked my my professional pants that also can be sweatpants.
I love that for you.
Because that's where we are.
Well, welcome back to Couch Convos, where we have very tough conversations about the real world, clinical applications, and just being human.
Yeah, and today is one of those days.
It is. Truthfully, we've actually had like parts of this episode drafted for a year.
A year. Yeah.
So if you're listening to this or you're not listening to this thinking, yeah, I don't want to think about it. We didn't either.
So we pushed it off for
Yes.
an entire year.
So just know that like if you really want to hear us unfiltered, you've come to the right episode.
You have arrived.
Yeah.
And the reason that we, decided, okay, it's officially time.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's take the dive is because we're coming up on holidays.
Yeah.
We're coming up on Thanksgiving, coming up on Christmas. We've already had Easter.
We just had Yom Kippur yesterday.
Yeah.
We had Rosh Hashanah earlier this week. So we're in the high holidays. We're going into more holidays. Let's talk about grief.
Grief work.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're in the space.
We
and
are.
We're doing it. And we might have mentioned this before, but we don't love talking about grief. And I know me, I don't love doing it clinically either.
Yeah.
And even when it comes up in sessions, I say like,
hard.
yeah, I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know that like I'm here for you.
Yeah.
However, if we're going to get like deep in this, that maybe we need to find more specialized care because I just truly, it's tough.
And like we'll go into it a little bit later in the episode too, but therapy with grief, it's just its own different animal.
Yep.
And I think that kind of lands in like the universal is that we all are impacted by grief in a very different, just highly intimate way. And largely it's just not talked about.
Right.
Which is why we're here.
Which is why we're here.
It is.
So let's start with a nice little stat.
Love that. We love numbers.
So, more than half of Americans, 57% to be exact, report experiencing a major loss in the past 3 years, yet grief remains one of the least discussed emotional experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I'm honestly surprised only 57% past 3 years.
This stat was pre-COVID.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that changes things.
It do.
Personal relationship with grief.
What's
What's it look like?
I actually described it earlier this year. We had to put one of my childhood dogs down, and it was a really beautiful passing. And I was speaking with the vet and the vet tech because I didn't want to witness certain things. I wanted to excuse myself. But before I left, I looked at them and I said, hey, like, can you please keep an eye on my parents? And I said, grief is a close family friend. Yeah. And that's how I described it. And I was like, we are no stranger to grief. And that's kind of how I would explain it. My own personal relationship to grief has made me hardened in a lot of ways. And I think those closest to me could almost to the day see a shift in, I don't want to say like my personality, but parts of it, honestly. For me, grief has hardened me significantly to certain things, but it's also softened me significantly too. Yeah. People say it's the club you never want to be in, and it's true. And you can tell who's been through it and who hasn't. But you never want to be in the club.
Right.
In the club, we all fail. What about you?
So I would love to, work off of that. It's a lot like Fight Club. We don't talk about Fight Club. That's kind of my personal relationship with grief is very much it's happened and I am sad, but I am not going to talk about it, and I'm going to go into a little hole, and it's going to be like it didn't even happen until it just shows up and pops up on me, and then I'm like, hey, you're here. And usually I cope with it by, and this is not necessarily a unhelpful thing, but I think the way that I use it is somewhat unhelpful. Of very much like, well, okay, God has them now. And they're with all of the family members and they're doing all this. And like, that's kind of how I cope of like, oh, they're in the better place. And I say that to myself. I don't say that to other people because I know that is not helpful.
Yeah.
But that's how I manage it with me. So not helpful. Some would say not healthy. Which is why, I've had a moment. We're all human, you guys, and even the counselors, we have our things, and that's probably just one of my things.
I actually noticed in my own therapy. So when I was growing up, unfortunately, my maternal grandparents passed away when I was very young. So when I was an infant and then when I was in elementary school, we lost both of them. So I was like around grief, but it never impacted me directly. Like I remember watching my parents go through grief.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like one of my parents lost a sibling when I was growing up, and obviously my mom lost both of her parents way too early. So like I watched a lot of grief, but I wasn't impacted by it personally until my mid-20s. And it was funny growing up, whenever I'd get like a cold call from my mom, she would always know, like I'd pick up and she would always say like, this person, and this person are all okay. And then she'd get to wherever she called me. They're all gone now, like, which is wild. And so I think it's one of those where my first instance with grief, I lost the most important people in my life.
Yeah.
And so, it's just one of those things where like it changes you very much so, but I'm kind of glad it did because there's a reason. And there's like, everyone says like grief is love with nowhere to go. Like I'm grateful to have been profoundly impacted by something so intentionally that it still impacts me. Yeah. Almost every day. So grief in the therapy room. When I was like thinking about this episode, I was really reminded that we weren't taught about grief in graduate school and in like counselor prep at all.
Yeah, I mean, they went through the stages with Kubler-Ross, however you say that. And I remember them going a little bit into it, but then outside of that, it's not like we didn't have a course. No. We didn't have a training. There was no program situation. And of course, like for all of you guys out there, we've probably already heard about the stages of grief.
Yes.
Of like, there's first denial. I always remember it as DABDA. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. Yeah. And a lot of times, like when we look at stages, we think, oh, they're linear. They happen this, then this, so then gross. This, then this.
Plug our healing isn't linear episode.
Yeah. But, I think that actually our program, because when I read through this, I was like, I think our program actually did a good job of making sure that they said, this does not happen in a linear phase. No. It does not even happen in a 1, 2, and then back to 1. Of instead, it could be like first, then last, then back to third.
Could be in multiple stages at once.
And that once you get to acceptance, that doesn't mean you stay in acceptance. That it's going to come back around. So I think our program did a good job of explaining that, so that we were able to actually make it realistic.
Well, and I think that like, do I love the stages? No, not at all. Just because of what you said, it's like it's not like, oh, you spend 4 weeks in denial and then no, not at all. And I guess to break down the stages, denial is obviously like, no, this didn't happen. Anger. Bargaining is so much of like, I would do anything to get them back, like that kind of rationale. Depression, and then acceptance and kind of that moving forward. I like that the stages exist to give a name to certain feelings. Right. Because I think grief is one of those that just gets so cloudy and it's so hard to think straight and just functioning feels so much harder. So I like that there are names for certain things, but I would never say that we go through them. But I agree. I think our program did a great job. And you don't have to like check off boxes. Yeah. And I also don't love this idea of stages because it's almost like, well, once you get to acceptance, you're done, right?
Right.
It's like, no. No.
And for some of us, we'll never have bargaining or we'll never have denial. So,
okay.
Like you said, I think it's good that they're putting a name to it of saying like, if you had this experience, other people have also had this experience without like pigeonholing of you have to have this experience in this order.
Well, and like also looking at like the math side of things, like 7 to 10% of adults develop a prolonged grief disorder, which I even double checked it. It's not in the DSM, so it's not a formal DSM diagnosis, which is interesting. Again, that DSM we need the new one. Yeah, we've needed it for a while. But again, like that prolonged grief disorder is when grief stays debilitating beyond 1 year. But again, debilitating is different for everybody, right? Because it's been 3 years since I've had a really significant traumatic loss in my life. And if someone looked at me, they would say, you don't have debilitating grief. You function just fine. But for me, if you asked me, I wouldn't call things debilitating, but I would say I think about these things more than 3 to 4 times a week. Yeah. So it's one of those where it's like,
high functioning grief.
Yes, exactly. And only 7 to 10% of adults. Yeah. Again, it's just like, where are these numbers coming from? Right. But all things to say that, I sounded like my sister-in-law, Anna. She says that all the time.
All things to say.
Hi, Anna, if you ever listen to this. Grief doesn't have an end time. And I also think that that's what makes therapists so frustrated with it sometimes. It's because there's powerlessness involved.
Lots of powerlessness. And of almost essentially trying to convince your client of, hey, there is no one way to do this. Yeah. There is no one size fits all. There is no timeline. There is no end. Because, we'll get into that. That's a different question. So we'll wait on that. Yeah. Because I have a whole soapbox for that one. So we kind of talked about how, like, in our program, we understood the one stage situation. We talked about it maybe for one class in a two, three. How many years were we in grad school? 3.
It was like 3 technically, but it was like 2.5.
2.5, 3. Yeah. So in those many years, we had like essentially 60 minutes. 60 minutes of it.
So okay, what do you feel like you took from that, and why do you feel like grief just isn't talked about in like counselor education?
So I truly don't know why grief is not talked about in counselor education. The only thing that I could potentially think could be a reasoning behind it is because it seems so quote unquote few and far between. Yeah. Like, and I think a lot of people think, grief is just when you have loss of a person. And so when you look at it like that, then it's like, okay, well, there's, only a certain amount of people we have in our life. It typically happens at an older age. Maybe people think, counseling is for the young, the youthful, and so they're not managing who's that? From New Girl?
From Schmidt from New Girl.
Yeah, the youths. Bring in the humor.
It's gonna be a lot of that.
Yeah. Of like, maybe there's this assumption that we're not having grief moments when in reality that is not true, and it is not just with the loss of people.
That's true. Also,
it's hard.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest. It's hard. And tough. There's not a lot of, I would assume, research on it.
No, not at all. It just is like ambiguous unicorn.
Yeah.
I think from school, when I think of our graduate program, I think of there were certain topics that they knew they had to touch on, but I could tell they just didn't want to. Yeah. And it was just like, all right, we're going to spend 60 minutes on this and we're going to move forward. One of them was working with children.
Oh, true.
Because sometimes I felt like they were kind of looking at us like a dirty sock of like, okay, the kid people go over there. And I think grief was one of those topics. And I think I agree with you. I think that we didn't talk a lot about it because everyone has some sort of connection to it. I think like it's a lot like cancer is. It's so common that we all have some sort of personal anecdote, or even if it's not an intense feeling, it's just a connection. But again, so much of like classic therapy training and classic psychology is around like fixes, which feels really gross to say because we also personally don't ascribe by that methodology of let's fix this. And I think that's where people get stuck, is that grief isn't something to fix. There's no ending. It just impacts you. And then there's what's after grief. So I think that maybe there was a lot of frustration and red tape too, because again, like our program thrived on evidence-based and like clinically researched. Yeah. Like you said, there's not a lot of research on grief. There's on it like depression and trauma, but not grief specifically.
Right. And it's that element of you can't fix it.
Yeah.
Of like, it's not just something that ends or something that, it can feel more manageable, but it never feels better.
Yeah. Well, and like, I feel like when clients show up to therapy for grief, that's usually the concern. It's like, this happened to me. I just don't want to feel like this anymore. I just want to feel better. I just want to feel different.
Yeah.
And again, like, it's a lot of those people like looking for that like Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Or even just like looking for permission to feel it. Because like we even said that grief isn't talked about. I think therapy is a really beautiful space where people say like, oh no, I can talk about them here. Because so often it's silenced in just normal conversation.
And I think that, a lot of times in the room, people come in of like, I want to make things neater. I want to figure things out. I want to, have these coping skills. I want to have, sure, we can give coping skills. We can give like activities, techniques, things for grief of like, here's how we hold grief. But in reality, we still hold it. It's not like something that we can just like set down and be like, okay, I'm done with that. This has improved for the rest of my life. Whereas in reality, it's like, no, it's there and we got to walk alongside of it. And that's really hard, one, to teach in school, but two, honestly, grief counselors, you guys shout out there. If you are listening, drop a comment, please, with your website and all the things, because we need more grief counselors specifically, because it's hard. It's hard work. Yeah.
So, okay. Have you heard of Tanner and Shay Martin by any chance?
No.
So they're a little bit younger than us, I believe. But they are both, well, Tanner wasn't able to go to graduate school, but Shay did. Shay is an MFT now. Tanner actually recently lost his battle with colon cancer. And again, I think he's 29 when he passed, 29 or 30. And I actually just recently listened to a podcast where Shay, his wife, went on. And again, like as a therapist, and he had a 5-year-long battle with cancer and was in hospice care. And she kind of helped him with his transition, because that's like the hospice term for death. Yeah. And if anyone's listening to this and they want to hear someone that's highly specialized in grief work, I highly recommend looking at Tanner and Shay. That's their like Instagram handle. That's their TikTok handle. And they're on the Unplanned podcast. Recently, Shay was. It was a really beautiful conversation about his passing. Again, like there is sensitive topics there because she talks about his passing. But I think the way she talks about his death, it was really, really beautiful. And I took a lot from that experience. And I honestly wish that like in one of our graduate school classes, we had just heard a podcast like that about death and dying. I also learned that death doulas existed.
Death doulas?
Yeah, because obviously we know about doulas for birth.
Right.
They have death doulas now to like literally assist the person and their loved ones in passing to make it like a peaceful experience. And she was talking about how their death doula like arranged a living funeral for Tanner. It was really beautiful. And I was like, we need more of that here. Wow. It also made me think that like, ooh, like I wish I could like volunteer as that kind of person.
As a death doula?
Yeah. I know. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, my mind just went to, whoa. Oh my gosh. Okay.
But again, like that's what grief does.
Yeah.
Because it not only is it something that obviously we will talk about it, grief can look very different, but it also brings up this idea of a universal of passing. Yeah. We can't ignore that all of us will eventually pass. Right. And that, I mean, talk about existential dread sometimes. Like that's so uncomfortable for most people, and it brings up a lot of different feelings. Yeah. Understandably.
Yeah. And with the amount of views about what happens after we pass too, then that completely alters the conversation as well. Yeah. And sometimes actually that can get a little bit heated. So then that's uncomfortable of having to talk about, well, what happens afterwards. So there's just so many layers.
And then when you go through grief, you might question your beliefs about what happens. Again, in that podcast, Shay, they're members of the LDS church, which for people listening, like I'm not even close to a member of the LDS church. Not even close. But I loved what she had to say. And she was talking about, she listened to a talk at, I believe they call it their temple. I don't think it's a church in the LDS faith. But she was listening to a talk, and the person said, do you have faith that he won't be cured? because she was talking about like her faith and like with his passing and being in hospice care. And everyone was like, oh, like he'll be healed. And do you have faith he'll be healed? And she said, well, I think I have faith that he won't be healed. And like, I literally just got chills, like thinking about that again.
Yeah.
Like, it really kicks up those belief systems.
Yeah.
Again, the podcast is amazing.
Yeah. We'll have to link the podcast.
It's a good one.
Maybe too.
I cried, but like, which is really hard for me to do.
Yeah. But it just perfectly layers into this idea that grief is not neat. It is not tiny. It is not fixable. That instead that it's just something that we hold and we carry alongside of us. Yeah. And it's a companion of like, we're going to manage it as it comes, what it looks like, without judgment and without a timeline for it.
Well, I know that we've like briefly mentioned like how it can show up in the therapy room, but I think we have like a really cool, unique perspective of working with children, teens, and adults. Yeah. What do you notice about the differences and how grief can show up in the different age groups?
Yeah. So I've noticed that with kids, it's a lot of like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Like a lot of what does this mean? Yes. A lot of what does this mean? Where do they go?
Where'd they go?
Yeah.
Are
of
they
like
coming
what
back?
happens next. Whereas with adults, I think it's a lot of like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Like how do I
move forward?
How do I do this?
Yeah.
So like kids, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of curiosity of just around the event. Yeah, because I mean, and then too that brings in conversations with parents of like, hey, what are your beliefs in the family? What does this look like? And managing with that, as well as conversations, open conversation. And you know, that curiosity, honestly, I think it's so beautiful because there's a certain amount of helpful fear, but not fear that is debilitating or this is a scary thing or a bad thing. Yeah. Instead, it's like a curious, I don't know what happens next, change kind of thing. Sure. Whereas then with adults, it's a lot of like shame, straight like debilitating fear of I just don't know what to do next, and that scares me, and am I not doing this the right way? Yeah. Or shut down.
One, and I'll definitely have to ask permission before we keep this in, but my nephew actually brought up a good thing about grief recently that like got me thinking. So we lost someone in our family a year and a half ago. What year is it? 2025.
2025.
I got married in 23. Was it 2024?
I think it was 2024.
Okay, I think so. Thank you. So we lost someone very close to us in spring of 24, and my nephew was aware, and he's a toddler. I don't want to give too many identifying details, but he's a very young child, but he's really, really bright and has the biggest heart. He's just the coolest kid ever. But my brother was telling me, because this is his son, he was saying that one day they were outside, and he asked my brother, like, hey, where is this person? Where'd he go? And my brother, and obviously, like, when this person passed, like, my brother talked to him about it, and they're doing, oh my gosh, they're the best parents ever. And this kid is just,
a gem.
I love them so much. My two nephews are the best. But my older of my two nephews, he was like, well, where'd he go? And my brother told him again, like, hey, like, they died. This is what happened. Then all of a sudden, my nephew was like, I got to go tell mama. And then so apparently he, like, toddled in, and he ran over to my sister-in-law and was like, Mama, did you know they died? My poor sister-in-law was probably like, But I think it brings up that, like, grief, it will come back up. It doesn't matter what age you are. And it's really interesting, like, developmentally, when this person passed and his development and upbringing, how he managed that. So one, love that he's comfortable enough to ask these questions. Again, my brother and my sister-in-law are rock star parents. But I also think that, like, I agree with you. Grief with children, it's so much more hopeful, I would say, because the first word that comes to mind is lighter. It's so much more hopeful because they're like, oh, well, they've passed away. And then they talk about, like, whatever belief systems they have about what's next. And then they talk about, like, oh, like, I remember him with a tree we planted, or I have a memory box or a book about them, or in sessions I've worked with kids to make that, like, memory something. But of course, and with adults, it's just heavy. Yeah. And it gets really dark. Yeah. And so it makes me really wonder, like, where does that hope dwindle? Like, at what point in childhood to adulthood does that hope and grief fade? Things to think about.
It is something to think about. My mind essentially goes to object permanence.
Yeah. I mean, that was, for little dudes specifically.
Yes, yeah. But even for like adults too. We were having a conversation with someone the other day, if you're listening, was
Hi.
of like object permanence with people. If they're not right in front of us, we sometimes forget.
Yeah.
And so I think that changes too. Of some of us adults, we struggle with object permanence, but definitely children too, of like not understanding, hey, one, they're not in front of us, so do they exist? And two, like hearing they're not here, does it like process in their brain that means they'll never be actually here anymore?
Like I know with some children, just depending on where they're at intellectually and mentally and emotionally, we've like talked about grief sometimes, and they'll be like, well, where'd they go?
Yeah.
And my goodness, I wish I could bottle up like childhood and sell it. They were like, did they go to Target? And I said, man, I hope one day that's where I go next, is a super
just
Target.
A constant Target.
A super Target.
Shopping adventure.
Right. I hope I go to either a super Target or like the 90s era Taco Bell.
90s era.
Where I have no tummy troubles.
Yeah. I feel that.
But sometimes like all these kids are like, oh, where did they go? Or like, are they coming back?
Yeah. And
so I think it brings up that, like, again, grief looks different. There's the quote unquote loud grief of the anger, the depression, like we call it the clinically significant distress. But there's a lot of quiet grief. And I would argue there's more quiet grief than loud grief.
No, I would agree with that for sure. Because a lot of us, it seems unstable, quote unquote, to be angry. Yeah. We've talked about that, of like feminine rage, of like, you shouldn't be angry about this.
Right.
And so then I think a lot of us mute ourselves of, there is rage, there is some anger in this of like, why is this happening? Why is this person not here anymore? And what we know from anger, it's actually things going on underneath the surface. But sometimes it's good to just kind of let that out, let that be there.
We're also both quiet grievers.
We are both we're quiet feelers in a lot of ways.
Oh, for sure.
So
we both have like flip-flopped a lot over the years of quiet versus loud feeling. I think we've stayed quiet for a hot minute.
Yeah.
I'm cool with it.
working through all of that.
Well, and I think it's this idea that like grief is telling you what the rage can't really cover up. And it's saying like, you know what, if we actually, like we talked about rage and anger, if we lean into grief, it will teach us something. But the idea of leaning into grief, feels threatening, it feels violating, it's terrifying because it's hard and it hurts. And I do think that the pain of grief is a very unique kind of pain too.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go into the many forms of grief.
There's so many forms of grief. And I don't think people realize that this is grief.
Yeah.
Like, I know we talked about like death of a person.
Right.
There's so much more grief out there.
Oh my gosh, so much more. Like, and we even talk about, even with the death of a person, there's other grief behind that. Yeah. Like self of regrets. I wish I would have said these things. I wish I would have done this. But even just our own self of, let's take out the loss of a human or a person or a dog, family member, all the things, of just, I know that, but like regret in a decision we make, or times that we didn't say what we wanted to say, or dreams or needs that were not met, whether that's in childhood or currently. But there's also relationships, of relationships ending, breaking relationships up, changing,
even like the slow fade of relationships too. Oh, those are hard.
Or even like you're still in each other's life, but the friendship looks different, or the relationship looks different, the parental situation looks different. Of course, there's a specific person, and or animal. There's also like expectations, timelines.
I wish people talked about like the grief of expectations. I talk a lot about that with clients, especially in their 20s and 30s.
Yes,
with their parents.
20s to 30s are, and too the switching when parents then become almost from caretakers to now we're taking care of them, and what that's like, and grieving that change of that. And then like life stages of adolescence, missing adolescence. I was talking to my friend Mariah the other day I was like, I just want to go back to the time where I was sitting on the couch watching Hannah Montana, no responsibilities, and just vibing.
With my gauchos, my jelly shoes, my Lisa Frank pens.
Yes, of like, I just don't want responsibility right now. And I'm tired.
We just talked about that yesterday, actually. You at work. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we did, didn't we? Man, quiet feelers right here. But yeah, just like that, oh man, life has changed.
Yes.
And age has changed.
Yes. And like even like grieving your physical body. I know that I work with a lot of like mamas and mamas to be and postpartum mamas too, about like grieving your life pre-baby and now with baby, and grieving like your identity, who you are, your physical body and how it's changed. I obviously do a lot of chronic illness work as well, and there's a lot of grieving what you were hoping for your body versus what you have and what the future will look like. So it's so present. It makes me think of, have you heard of like the sandwich generation too? Oof. We are starting to enter that phase, which is, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And I feel like if our clients are hearing this, they're going to clock our approximate age band, which is fine. But if the sandwich generation, for a lot of folks, it's when you're taking care of someone older than you and younger than you at the same time. Yeah. Which is, it's such a unique paradox of caregiving and caretaking. I actually got my first experience with caretaking a few years ago with a loss, and I truly cannot imagine having to caretake for both older and younger at the same time. Yeah. But there's a lot of grief work there. There's also proactive and reactive grief too. Yeah. You can grieve someone while they're still around and after.
Definitely. And we've kind of already tapped into this about the idea that like just as we age, that doesn't take grief away or make it more normal or more like mundane. Of actually like 1/3 of older adults still feel very strong and severe like grief responses and reactions to losing someone, because as we get older, it doesn't change for us. It's still a process that happens. Even if we've had, time to process through, oh, this is coming, there's still that feeling that comes along with it.
Well, and when we're thinking about grief, do you feel like personally there are types of grief that you overlook? And like how or like why do you feel like those things are minimized for you?
Yes. So, I would honestly say expectations or like things that I don't meet. I try and go very toxically positive of, okay, fine. We're good. Fine. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to figure it out. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And I think that's just because my mindset was always very much like, okay, that didn't work. So what's going to happen next? What are we going to do next? Let's figure it out. Instead of just sitting in like, actually, that really sucked. Yeah. I was really excited for that, or I was really hoping for that. Sure. So I think that would be mine. Yeah. As well as, of course, losses of people. Yeah. Of like, it is very hard around like the seasonal changes. Yeah. And, we try and do a little something. We'll have like a conversation about it. But then after that, it's very much, okay, cool, let's keep going. And I think that sometimes mitigates and shelters my actual feelings. But anywho, how about you?
I think I minimize life stage grief a lot. Just because like so much of like entering and exiting life stages is so exciting for so many reasons, but it also can kick up a lot of that grief. I tend to not think about it. I also remember like I had to grieve something very, very heavy and personal while I entered a new life stage. Yeah. And so like I had a very profound traumatic loss while I was engaged, and like 2 days after I lost someone, I went and picked up my wedding dress. And like I still don't really remember a lot of details about that day. But I do remember like having to go try it on at the bridal boutique and just like looking in the mirror being like, I don't know what's happening. And I think it was actually really interesting I spoke to my mom about it a lot in that chapter of the joy of getting married and the grief of that loss. It very much felt like the joy was stealing from the grief and the grief was stealing from the joy. And I couldn't have either. And so I think that a big grief that I overlook is like life stage. It was also just like a wild experience to go through that at the same time. But I think it made me a better human because of it. Certainly made me a better therapist, that's for sure. Yeah, definitely. It's a big one. But I think it's just like this idea that we can grieve ourselves too. and we can grieve these versions of ourselves and maybe the lives that like we were never able to show up for or have, or maybe when we showed up and we weren't proud of ourselves either. There's still grief there too.
Right.
Again, it's just like the versions of you that maybe just didn't happen. It's a tough one.
It's a tough one. So there is this idea of, you know, when we talk about grief, there's living in it and then there's living with it.
The first time I heard that, I remember the first time I heard it, my own therapist told me, and I was like,
it's like a light bulb moment.
Love this. Yeah. So, okay, what's the difference?
So living in grief is like total immersion.
Yeah.
Of we are feeling
everything.
Raw, unrelenting. It's always constant. Essentially, it's like you are in the hole and there is no ladder.
Yeah. No ladder, no light,
no
nothing.
Light, just sitting in it of
in
like
it.
A puddle, which like it happens, right? And then there's living with grief, which that's through processing where we're able to like carry it, integrate it into life, understanding what it means, and then also like keep moving with it of recognizing, okay, life does go on. That does not mean that this person is gone. It does not mean that this pain is gone, but it means that I can hold it while we keep moving forward.
And I feel like that's almost like the big objective of therapy as a whole is you go from living in to living with something. It doesn't even have to be grief. And I think that a lot of people are sometimes like disappointed in that.
Yep.
Because they're like,
I want it to be taken away.
I want it to be gone. And there's certain things where like we can like resolve a lot of like very specific things.
Right.
But when we think about things like grief, like that's the goal, is for you to just kind of coexist with it. It's kind of just like a shadow sometimes. You know, sometimes it's super sunny. The shadow is there. Yeah. It will be there, but maybe other days like it's overcast and you actually don't see your shadow. It's still there, but like it's just not a big part of your day, and that's okay. Yeah. It's just like a different version of closure because it's not actually closed.
Right. It's just continuous closure, mini closures of like it's like a road block where you hit it and then you keep going. Yeah. You check in, you keep going.
You got to figure a way through it somehow.
I was going to say a different metaphor and I was like, nah, there might be like children, I don't know, listening. So then I decided not to do that one. But anywho, so 6% follow a high persistent grief path. Approximately 38% have low persistent grief. Others fluctuate, showing grief is rarely linear. And we've kind of already talked about that, how sometimes we're going to feel it one way, another way we're going to feel it. And it also changes based on who we are as people and how we process.
Also, like, again, like we talked about this, the month of the year and the time of the year. Obviously, like this is why we're even doing this now anyway. Like we are entering a season where like grief kicks up for a lot of people. Yeah. And it might be really quiet, but it's still there. Like you will notice when there's not that seat at your table, or if there are extra seats at the table, that it's like, oh, this is a change too. There can be grief of that life stage. So it can get kicked up pretty easily. Yeah.
Okay. So can we ever truly move on?
No. And I think I said that already. I'm not sure if I said that on air or off. Is you don't want to move on. At least that's me as a person. Yeah. So this is me outside of clinical. Like I don't think I would ever want to move on from the grief I've had. Yeah. Because they were here and they were very important to me, and I want them to still be here. They're just here in a different way. And so I don't think it's moving on. I think it's moving forward. Yeah. In that way. And I think living with that grief in a more like sustainable way could look like feeling it and acknowledging it and not pushing it away. Or when you feel like you want to, talking about it.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah. No, I just like you said, I don't think there's ever a way to move on. And I think that that's a helpful thing of like, no, I want to continue to remember that this person's in my life because they mean a lot to me and that I still love them just because they're not physically in front of me. But it's just the being able to move forward. And I agree. It looks like, okay, giving space to it. Yeah. Of like when it starts to come up, and though I don't do this all the time, I will say I know that this is helpful and it's what needs to be done. Yeah. Is like giving space to it of, hey, you know, I really want to talk about this. And whether that's I want to talk about it with my family or my partner or my friend or even just myself.
Yourself. Like spending some time, like something I did, I think it was like last year or the year before, on like a certain person's birthday. Like I baked 2 cupcakes. Just 2. I baked 2 lemon cupcakes, and that's all I did. I didn't talk about it. I didn't do anything. There may have been some tears in the batter, but like that's what I did. And again, it's just living with grief. Yeah. So I know that we talked a lot about the heaviness of grief, where it is, how it can show up. But again, like, what do you do with it? I know we've established that it's not a quick fix, but like, it's overwhelming. Like, what are ways to manage it? Strategies.
Self-compassion.
Yeah.
Of like not judging ourselves, of supporting ourselves instead of letting that inner critic come in and be like, you shouldn't be still upset about this.
You're being too dramatic
You're
or too
sensitive.
much.
No, instead of just like, no, like, it's okay for me to have these feelings.
Yeah.
It's okay for me to not hold on to these feelings. It's good for me to allow them to flow through and to be there with that realistic expectation of they're going to come and go.
When it's also this idea of like rituals, if you want to have them, and like making meaning. So like for some kids, it's like the memory box, or still celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, or like traditions you had together. Do you have any like grief rituals that you do? I'm curious. No?
0.
I've had a few like very unhinged ones in the last few years, I will say. It's usually food related. My grandfather was very aggressively German in his food, and so he would eat like pickled herring.
Oh.
Yeah, really salty, very fishy, stinky. But then there are also like spice drops, and like I just remember one holiday season, like I found a bag of like spice drops, and I bought it. So like little things. Yeah, it's like getting those same things. I'm probably not going to be eating pickled herring.
Fair,
but like spice drops for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just like sometimes having fun, because I do think that when it comes to grieving a person, it's like the latency and the recency effect. We often think about the last time we saw them, and that's what sticks.
Yeah.
I think a good way to manage grief through rituals and meaning making, remember the whole experience you had with them. It's very easy to remember the last time, especially now that the lasts are often traumatic for a lot of folks for different reasons. Give yourself the space to think of the whole person too.
Yeah.
Especially the whole relationship.
Right. And like finding community, whether that's like an actual group, like a grief group, or whether it's just people that you feel comfortable and safe talking to, whether they knew the person or whether they didn't.
It's like we talked about grief. It gives you into that club you didn't want to be a part of. You don't join the dead insert relative here club.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, sometimes feels nice to just go to someone and be like, hey, I'm feeling this, and be like, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I'm feeling that too right now, and be like, okay, cool, I'm not alone. Yep. Like even just feeling not alone, of like, this is just mine. No, we can share it with others.
Or even just like letting someone know, like, hey, this is coming up. Just telling you. Yeah, that's all it takes. So that you just don't have to feel that alone. Also, just like boundaries are so helpful, especially on the holidays. People will express their grief in certain ways, and protecting yourself how you need to, whether that's stepping out, whether it's inviting that conversation to the table or to someone specific. Like, it's okay to have that.
Yeah. And y'all, it's truly really important, because it can increase things like suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, self-harm, increased depression, anxiety, and even like cortisol levels, stress, our blood pressure, all of these things of like, there's a physical response when we are holding on to something that is this tough and this hard by ourselves.
And I know that's really overwhelming, and I think that like when we're talking about these strategies, we could probably make a whole podcast episode on strategies for managing grief. Easily, we could fill up that time. But I think the whole idea is finding what works for you. Maybe it's you were on a certain trail that you love and it helps you think and feel. I actually Spotify, you can generate AI playlists. And I literally one day I said like, can you please make me a playlist that can feel like a hug from this kind of person? And it made me a playlist for that.
That's wild.
I will say it included the song from Toy Story 2. You
Got a Friend in Me?
No, it was like When She Loved Me, about Jessie and her. I know.
Oh my God.
It kicked on the playlist and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm taking this off. Yeah. But again, like finding what works for you. It might not look like a playlist, but maybe it's calling somebody, maybe it's taking a walk, cooking. It could be like dancing. It doesn't have to be solemn. It could be really joyful too. Some of my favorite ways to remember people or elements of myself is like through joy. It's through a great glass of sangria sometimes. Or some Sinatra in my kitchen, you know? Yeah. Good red sauce on the stove.
So with this, like, when it comes to the clinical perspective of how do we help clients to balance like honoring their grief while also like caring for themselves through it?
I think the big one is consistency, truthfully, with clients, because I think that there's a lot of shame and pressure to quote unquote get over it. And I'm really lucky to work with a lot of clients long term. And it makes me sad to have this reaction, but usually I'll check in every few months and I'll say like, hey, like, how's your grief going? And I'll name the person. I'll say their name, not just like, how are you doing with grief? I'll say like, hey, like, how are you feeling about insert name here and their birthday coming up or the holidays? Talk about them, ask. And I think clinically, like, invite their grief back into the room because again, like, we don't talk about these things. I think a lot of clients and people in general push their grief away. And I think one thing that we could really do as clinicians better is bring it back in and just offer them that option to take it if they want. Yeah. What do you think?
I agree. And I think you mentioned it of like releasing that shame and that judgment of I'm supposed to be over it. Yeah. And that if I talk about it, that it's going to make it worse or it's like dangerous or bad or it's going to cause all of these extra feeling. It might cause extra feeling. It might cause more because it's on the brain, but that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's going to be there for forever and ever and ever, but instead like our brain can do magical things. It cannot convince us that feelings are not there.
That's true.
And so, so embracing onto those and being like, okay, we're going to sit with this for a little bit. And I love the idea of like calling it to the space of like using their name. Yeah. Of absolutely. Saying like, how are you doing now that insert name is blah, blah. Because I know a lot of times we want to skirt around it.
We do.
It's like the idea of like talking about sex with kids. If we don't talk about it, it's not happening. Whereas in reality, like, no, it's still there. And they deserve to have their name
absolutely said. Well, because again, like there's that fear. And I think that clients and people in general have this fear of grief is so profoundly impactful. It's very painful for a lot of folks. They're almost afraid of hurting whoever they're talking to about it. Yeah. Because I know that some of like my very like long time like ride or die clients are like, well, sometimes I'm worried about bringing this up because like it's really heavy, but I always let them know like, hey, that's what we're here for. And like, it's a pleasure to do this with you. Yeah. And first of all, like it doesn't impact me as a therapist at all. The only times it's ever impacted me was it was a dog. I don't know why that happened.
I don't know what it is about dogs.
I can talk about grief of people all day, every day. But I've worked with enough people who've lost dogs specifically.
That is where I will cry.
It's never like, I never like have like that physical reaction, but after that session, I'm like, all right. Yeah. I need to ground.
Yeah. I need to take a moment. Yeah. It's the animals, man. It's their purity. It's the animals. They're so pure.
Yes. And it's also just, I think it's bringing up like finding whatever works and making things like highly personalized and really creative. It's really freeing. Yeah. And just giving yourself that permission to say like, okay, like I want to talk about this or I don't. Again, it's all about choice here.
Yeah. It's not dangerous.
No.
We don't have to avoid it.
No.
It can actually be very transformative and great for us to be able to sit with that.
Yeah.
I know I've said this many times, practice what you preach, but and then like as we're moving forward, so some takeaways of like, okay, so what's next? Yeah. Of like checking in and recognizing that like grief is not linear.
No.
It changes from person to person. It changes from date to date, and that is okay. There is no timeline on your grief. You don't have to have it done in like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, a month, a year, 10 years, none of that. Of like, it's okay for it to be there.
Yeah. So, okay, wrapping things up. What is a way that you feel like grief transformed you? Like, it doesn't have to be like the dark and spooky, but like, how does it change you?
Yeah. Like, you know, you mentioned, is there like a grief ritual that I have? And I said no, but now I'm realizing that it has caused me to notice little things and be appreciative of it. Yeah. Like with my grandfather who passed away, there was a moment when we were coming back from a funeral and we were praying of like, hey, I want a sign. I want to know that you're okay. I want to know that you're like, you're safe, you're there. And there was like this pink like cloud sunset situation, and like every time I see that now I recognize it. Before I never recognized now it. It's something that like I appreciate. I can appreciate the small things. I can appreciate the flowers. I can appreciate the sky of like, dang, we live in such a beautiful world and it's so great to have that space. So that's me.
Yeah.
What about you?
Similar. I think grief has shown me a version of love that I didn't think existed. Like, first of all, it showed me a very dark part of myself that is really scary. And it still exists, but it's there for a reason. But I think it has given me a deeper appreciation for the people I want to keep in my corner. Because I know the folks that were in grief with me when I was in grief and who have stayed with me as I'm with grief. But similar to you, like, I think grief has made me slow down with a lot of things. I also think grief makes fun of me sometimes for similar versions to you. Grief made me really question my like ideal systems and my belief systems. And even it was a few days ago, there was a big grief anniversary that I went through. That was really hard, and I didn't say anything about it. I chose to take it on alone because I didn't want to invite in the emotions because it didn't feel convenient at the time. Yikes. But it's okay. I addressed it later. But I think it was one of those where grief kind of made fun of me a little bit, and it humbled me because I was having the thought of like, man, this feels very isolating. It doesn't really feel like there's a lot of understanding, and that's annoying. And I was getting really annoyed with myself, and I was cooking, and I had a random playlist on shuffle, but the next song that came on, I wish you were a Swiftie. It was Marjorie by Taylor Swift. And if the people are listening who are Swifties, I imagine you just had oh man, because I was literally thinking like, I just don't know what's next. And I actually was not a big believer in signs. I still question it all the time. But the second that song came on, Taylor Swift wrote it about her grandmother, who was a singer, and she even put her grandmother's voice as the backtrack. And like that song specifically, I actually have it on my wall.
That's what that song is?
It's the one on the far left. Yes, that song has always like been very, very deeply personal to me. It was one of those where like that song kicked up on my playlist, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. So yes, grief has transformed me in making me love so much more intentionally with other people. And it's so cheesy of like, you never know when your last day is, but like I do think of that very often. So it made me love a lot more intentionally, and it's humbled me greatly. It's also helped me slow down to look for those little things too.
Beautiful. So share stories. Reflect.
Say names. Speak it.
Practice like a walking, like Sarah mentioned, of like if you want to just go for a walk and just be like, you know what, I'm just gonna think about this for 10 minutes.
Nature is so healing for grief.
It truly is.
It's wild.
So getting out in nature, journaling, art,
touch
all
grass.
the things. Touch some grass. Go out there barefoot, DBT yourself. But the grief is not the enemy, though. It's really scary and it's really hard.
It is.
But that doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that it's dangerous.
And you are not alone. But again, like if you've gotten to this point in the episode, thank you. I think that this is one where we really do put ourselves on the line with this episode. I think more than any other. Because again, grief brings out a vulnerability in us that is very unique, and it's very difficult to access. And we really want to do this episode first to give suggestions and resources and affirmation to people going into the holiday season, but also to practice what we preach too, because that's why we're here. And if we aren't speaking about it, and if we're not normalizing it, then like, how do we work with clients? And it is uncomfortable. Oh my gosh. Like I am like sticking to the couch right now. It's very uncomfortable, but at the same time, it also can feel lighter of like, wow, I haven't actually spoken about this in a long time. So if you're listening to this, maybe talk to somebody. If there's a grief in your life, like maybe let's challenge you to speak about it in the next week or so.
Awesome. Well, as always, if you want to work with us, www.soulhavengeorgia.com. We're on all the social media platforms. Give us a like, give us a comment. We want to hear about all the things. We want to be there for you and support you. Absolutely. And, you know, this is not in lieu of therapy, of course. So if you feel like you are in danger, please take yourself to an emergency room, 988-911. Get this the help that you need. But we are here to help if you want to come chat with us. Absolutely. But until next time, thanks for hanging out.